Hello, everyone. I've got hard copies for anyone who wants them. Pens, if anybody needs a pen, let me know. And then I am not beyond bribing people. I always get right after lunch as my time slot, so I always bring candy. I don't think I have dark. And if you ask questions and interact, then you get to start the candy bowl. Eventually, I give in and everybody gets candy, but I always find that these conversations are so much better when there's interaction and you're getting out of them what you guys are interested in versus just me talking at you. And I will try to go pretty quickly through where we are in terms of school choice in Indiana and educational freedom so that we do have time for back and forth and questions and answers. But feel free to interrupt along the way with any thoughts or questions you might have. I am Betsy Wiley. I am the president of the Institute for Quality Education. I have been in this role for a decade now. When I left Governor Daniels' office at the end of his term, this is where I came. And we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization located here in Indianapolis with a statewide focus. And our area of work is really in a couple of different spaces. So we spend a lot of time at the State House on state level policy and development, as well as then implementing it out in the communities. Our main focus is school choice, but we do focus on everything K-12 related. So we're not really into the early learning space. There are a lot of other people doing early learning. And we haven't really been into the workforce space, but as we may get talking about, that's starting to kind of creep down into the K-12 space and the high school space. So we're a bit more involved in that than we've been in the past. We also operate the largest scholarship granting organization with respect to the tax credit scholarship program here in Indiana. We work with a couple hundred non-public schools in that regard. And then we spend a great deal of time trying to communicate to anyone and everyone. So parents and families about the educational options available to them. Policymakers, I know you had Senator Rotz here earlier today. We spend a lot of quality time together, but he and his peers at the State House, we spend a lot of time working with them, folks at the Department of Education, State Board of Ed, et cetera. What we don't really do is we don't really engage with local school districts in terms of school boards. There's 293 local school districts in the state of Indiana on the public school side, not to mention more than 120 charter schools and well over 300 non-public schools. So that would be a lot, and we just don't. We focus on state policy. So where are things going, right? And I think everybody has seen one of the interesting things coming out of the pandemic was educational freedom and choice has never been more popular or in demand than it has been coming out of the pandemic, right? The pandemic caused parents, whether they wanted to or not, they got like a front row seat to the education of their children. And so some of them liked it, some of them didn't, some of them had things they wanted to change. And so what we're seeing is a real parent demand-driven environment in terms of K-12 education, and it's sweeping the nation. For 2023, more than 40 states had bills around educational freedom and expanding or creating programs in their state, 111 different bills. And now almost 1 in 5 kids live in a state that has universal or nearly universal school choice as an option. We're one of the nearly universals until next year. And then if everything goes well, we'll be universal as well.
What distinguishes us from nearly?
So we still have an income cap on our programs. And it's our number one priority at IQE to get that income cap removed on the voucher program this year. And then that would mean that any child who's a resident of the state of Indiana could receive a voucher if they so choose.
Did that qualify for chocolate?
Oh, yes, you could to qualify. Excellent point.
I really was interested
In the chocolate? Yeah, I get it.
No, the dip.
I get it. I
Yeah,
get it.
I'm
I
just trying
get
to
it.
help you out there.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Someone asked what? So it's 400% of free and reduced price lunch. This year, that's about $230,000 for a family of 4. It is estimated that that covers about 96.5% of Indiana families with K-12 age children. So to remove that last little bit, it's estimated that it would cost the state. The new increase in the program amount would be about $12 million, which in the grand scheme of the budget, which I saw Senator Rotz shared some little fiscal cards, is teeny tiny. Yes, sir. So they are also an SGO. So we're competitors in that space. Now there's 5 that operate in the state of Indiana, and I would say we're competitors, and except that we don't really compete. We just coexist. Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, we do similar things. Yep. All right. So as we talked about, public support for school choice is at an all-time high. When I started this work, even in Governor Daniels' office, it was kind of a 50-50 proposition if people thought that there should be school choice, and here we are just a little over a decade later, and 75% of folks think that educational freedom and choice when it comes to their child's education is the right thing to do. What has kind of happened in Indiana, and we'll fly through this, Indiana has been a leader in the educational freedom and choice space from the very beginning. In 2001, we passed charter school laws in the state of Indiana as kind of our first foray into educational choice. In 2008, we had a major property tax reform bill, and as part of that, we then opened it up to allow district-to-district transfer. So where you might live we're in Pike right now, so you might live in Pike Township schools, but you don't feel as though that's the right fit and you want to go to Zionsville, and you can do that now. And you can do that without being charged for that. And so prior to that, that didn't happen because a bunch of that funding was being driven through your local property tax dollars. And in 2008, as part of property tax reform, the state said, we're not going to do that. We're going to take school funding. We're going to bring it up to the state. If you remember, that's when sales tax went up 1 penny because that's how they paid for it. And then that kind of erased those boundaries because it wasn't your local tax dollar that was the primary supporter of the operations at your schools. So that happened there. In 2009, the tax credit program, the SGO program that we were talking about, was passed. And then in 2011, a whole package of education reforms were passed, including creation of the voucher program, but also establishment of the A to F school accountability system, a charter school expansion, collective bargaining reforms, and teacher evaluation discussions, as well as merit pay. Since then, it's been expanding all of this over the years. And as we said, we've kind of been creeping up on the voucher program. So we, over the years, expanded it to include siblings, to include foster kids, to increase the income a little bit more, right? How could you get there? This year, again, we hope to say any child in the state of Indiana, regardless of income, can receive a voucher to attend a non-public school of their choice if they so choose. In 2023, we also established, 21, we also established the education savings. We call them scholarship accounts here in Indiana, ESA accounts. So they're kind of the newest form of choice that's sweeping the nation. It's kind of like a super voucher. So it allows a parent, a family, to receive in an account all the funding associated with their child's education that the program provides. In Indiana, that's 90% of tuition support. And I'm sure Senator Rotz talked about tuition support. And And this program is only for special needs children in Indiana right now. So it's 90% of tuition support plus any special needs funding that they get, which varies greatly from $500 to over $10,000, depending on the severity of the need of the child. All that money goes into account, and then the parent has the ability to totally customize their child's education. What they can't do is be enrolled in a public school, but they could be in full-time. They could be enrolled in a public school for a course or two. They could use it to go to a private school. They could use it to go to a non-accredited private school, which we have many, which you can't use a voucher to go to a non-accredited school, but you can use an ESA. They can also use it for additional things like therapies and tutoring and all things that are included in their educational, in their individual education plan. So that started in 2001, and we'll talk a little bit about how it's grown. And then we talked about the latest things here in 2003 and the fact that we've increased participation in the voucher program, which we hope to make universal. So what's it look like in terms of where our students go? We have about 1.1 million students in Indiana enrolled in K-12 schools. That we count. And I think the person after me is speaking on the homeschool perspective. You will notice that homeschool is not on this chart. Not because we don't love homeschool. In fact, just the opposite. Indiana, from a policy perspective, has such love and respect for homeschool that they do a very good job of staying out of it, which is great from a government perspective. However, we don't make anybody report that they homeschool, so we don't have an actual count at the state level in terms of how many homeschoolers we are. We know there's tens of thousands, right? I think somebody told me, oh, it's well over 20,000. I don't know. I think your next speaker might. I'd love to have a good source for that information so we could include that piece in the pie. But that's why they're not on there. I take this from the DOE, and we don't require homeschooling folks to report anything to the government. And we like it that way from the homeschool perspective, right? We want to keep it that way. But that's why they're not on there, because everybody always says, wait, where are the homeschoolers? As you look at this, what you'll see is about 20% of our students, 200,000 so kids, don't go to the school, the public school that they're geographically assigned to. They go somewhere else. They go to another public school. They go to a public charter school. They go to a non-public school. So school choice definitely working and growing in Indiana. Who's doing this? The Choice Scholarship Program, the voucher program, has morphed over time as we've expanded eligibility, and now that it's almost universal, it's reflective somewhat of our population as a state, right? It's not dramatically different. We have slightly more Hispanic kids that participate in the voucher program, slightly fewer as a percentage-wise, African American kids, and about the same in terms of white kids. There's always a conversation around the voucher program as we've been expanding it that you're just giving it to the wealthy who can already afford private school. They don't need to do that. We believe everybody's a taxpayer and everybody should get to utilize a percentage of their tax dollars to fund their child's education, wherever they may choose to do that, including a private school if they so choose. But the facts suggest that still, even with this nearly universal program, over half of them that utilize the program earn less than $100,000, and 25% roughly earn less than $50,000 in their household. So it is still very much serving the lower and lower middle income families. It's not just all going, you might hear the rhetoric that it's all going to the millionaires or whatever. Completely not true. With growth and eligibility comes growth in the program as well. So when we started out, we went from 241 schools to now over 357 private schools in the state of Indiana participating. We've added 30 new private schools since the beginning of the program. This year alone, we have like a dozen that are starting up or moving from non-accredited to accredited so that they can participate. So we're going to continue to see growth in different types of schooling environments. There is at least one voucher participating non-public school in every county. This is not the case for charter schools, which are public schools, but don't have all the same kind of regulations and restrictions. Those only exist in 29 of our 92 counties. Again, eligibility expansion. So this is the voucher program, but as you can see, when we started, we had 3,900 kids, and this year we eclipsed the 70,000 in terms of the number that are participating in the program. So money, how does this work? There still is a tremendous funding disparity when you look at students who utilize the Choice Scholarship or the voucher program. So last year, the voucher was roughly $6,200. The way that is calculated is 90% of your state-based tuition support. That ranges based on your school corporation. So for 2023 school year, Indianapolis Public Schools had the highest per pupil tuition support dollars at just over $6,800. Carmel Clay Schools had the lowest at $5,800, right? So your voucher amount is 90% of that number or 100% of your private school tuition and fees, whichever is less. We do have about 50% of our participating non-public schools who 100% of tuition and fees is less than their voucher amount. Although that's changing. They're starting to maybe look at their tuition policies a bit. So what's the disparity? So if you look at that, then just in state funding alone, you know, that's about $1,500 difference for these kids that we're investing in their education. But that's not the whole picture when it comes to student funding, right? So a large piece still comes from local property tax dollars. It makes up about a third, if you look at it, about a third of the total pie, in some districts more. So if you add all of that in, a voucher student receives about 50% of the funding as a traditional public education student would receive for their education. We'll talk about this a little bit more because one of the things that we always hear is, you said you could do more with less, and we will show academically that we do more with less, but one question would be how much less? And 50% seems like a lot less. So maybe we could figure out how to get a little more equitable funding for our students. We talked a bit about ESAs being the new kid on the block and truly a kind of the real truth and educational freedom. It'll be interesting to see how this program grows and expands in a state like Indiana that has a mature private school choice program, both in the voucher program and the tax credit program. So again, right now this is limited to special needs students that meet that income requirement that we talked about. In year one of the program, we had 169 participants. Last year was the second year, and we had 540 participants, right? 540 students. And so we're seeing growth, we're seeing it come together. But you know, what we will see another year or two down the road, and if we can expand it, is yet to be determined. So it's great that we have all this. It's great that it's nearly universal. The depressing part for us is that we know that half of the folks in Indiana don't know that they have any kind of option when it comes to their child's education. They just think that the public school that they're assigned to is where they have to go. They don't know they could go to a neighboring public school district. They don't know that charter schools are public schools and therefore don't charge tuition, and you could go and are open to everyone and there's no admissions policy. They don't know that there are programs like the voucher program and the SGO program and the ESA program that could help them with the cost of private schooling if that's what they chose to do. So getting the word out, speaking to groups like you all, speaking to anyone and everyone, that we have a whole team that works on this, is what we try to do. You can see a little bit there. Our outreach team last year did 320 different events around the state trying to let people know about this and assisted about 3,000 people on their journey. Yes, ma'am. We do. It's called myschooloptions.org, or you can just Google the Institute for Quality Education and it will take you there as well. Yes, sir.
How do you know that for a fact?
We do a statewide poll, an ask of 800 registered voters in the state of Indiana. So we do a poll every year on a wide variety of education issues to get feelings, but we always ask, are you aware of any of the following programs in the state of Indiana? Indiana Choice Scholarship Program, also known as the Voucher Program, the Tax Credit Scholarship Program, the ES, or, I'm not aware of any of these. Is a similar question there. You have earned candy. And then so have you. You can pass it around. Yes, ma'am.
Are you doing anything to essentially drive this from the inside out, like in the schools when you have a special needs instructor or teacher, are they getting informed of the programs you guys have to then let the families know?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest partner in the growth is the schools, right? We've come from a time where private schools were maybe on the ropes a little bit in terms of being able, not your elites, I'm sure they've always been able to fill their seats, but some of them in smaller communities, et cetera, to now they're hitting capacity, right? But they're the ones, they had a vested interest in trying to bring more people in. This was a way that others could afford to come. And so no question, special ed teachers and or administrators in the schools have been the greatest kind of lead generators to date. Yeah, absolutely.
Has there been any discussion in Indiana about micro schools?
Yes, and they're taken off. In fact, we helped host a micro school incubation conference last week. There were 40 individuals there that were interested in maybe starting micro schools in and around Indiana. So micro school is like a 2024 one-room schoolhouse. It can be, and I have learned from the Micro Schooling Association, there is no real definition of a micro school, meaning it could be 2 kids, it could be 100 kids. But think about learning pods as one kind of example of it. You might have 2 or 3 or 4 families that say, it's kind of maybe a variation of a homeschool environment, but we want to do it collectively. A lot of times, instead of them doing all of the education or some of the education, they'll hire maybe a retired teacher or a teacher that's just getting tired of. A lot of the teachers that are involved in micro schools or starting the micro schools are just like, I'm done with like the system and all the stuff. And I know your family and your family and your family, and I love your kids, and so I will teach all of them year round, right? And then I just don't have all the issues. And so, and they can potentially make more money, right? And so the parents. Mm-hmm. Yep. And you'll see all different varieties, right? Like some people may say, look, I choose to teach certain things, but then, I don't have any experience in science. And so we'll hire a science teacher or a biology teacher to teach our children in our micro school biology.
What's the difference than like the co-op stuff that a lot of schools?
It's very similar, very similar. No, not yet. Not yet.
Yeah, so why not? That doesn't make sense. It's your school, your kids' money that you're paying for their education. And the state's saying, you have to use it for, you can only use it for here, and here, not here.
Yeah. Now, if they wanted to become accredited, they could absolutely participate in the voucher program. But that's if you want to become accredited. And some choose not to. two kind of big barriers to why schools, even accredited non-public schools, there are still some that choose not to participate in the voucher program. The other big barrier is you got to take the state test. So accreditation, and then you got to take iLearn. And there are a lot of people that don't want to take iLearn. As of now, that's still a requirement in the voucher program. Now, in the ESA program, if we're ever successful in expanding that eligibility beyond special needs students and the sibling of special needs students, it says you can take the state test or a nationally norm reference test. And so there are a lot of those out there. And so that gives a little more flexibility. You still have to do some kind of test and share those results with the state so they feel like we can see that you're advancing a little bit educationally, but that has a little more flexibility than just the state test. So maybe we can move to something like that.
Well, there was, I can't remember who it was, but it was at our second meeting at the State House, and he spoke about where the money would follow the child.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to work on doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's what that is.
And that's really what the ESA is, but that's definitely what a
But it's
voucher is.
just now special ed right now, right?
Yeah, but it's what a voucher is. The problem is for a voucher, you can only use it for private school tuition. Yeah. Right now, which is what the majority want to use it for anyway. All right, let's see. Did I miss anything on that? I don't think so. So we talked a little bit earlier about academics, and I just have a couple different slides to visually show that kids that we talked about who utilizes the program, right, and that demographically they look like our total population. But when we see how they perform academically, those that attend non-public schools are academically outperforming those that are attending traditional public schools. And it has been this way for quite some time. You see a little bit of a reversal there. These are statewide numbers. A little bit of a difference on the Hispanic math proficiency number, but otherwise dramatically outperforming. And then I threw in Marion County just because. Yes, sir. So I don't know that anyone knows why. I would say that it when you drill down, it holds true when you even look at the subgroups, as statisticians would call them, right? So even when you're looking at it based on income, even, free and reduced lunch, English language learners. In fact, English language learners have a tendency to do even better, likely because they've got smaller, more specialized programs, but not necessarily. But yeah, so far we can't find, like in the data, that there's any reason. You can't say, oh, well, they're cherry picking all the affluent kids and I don't know, and they do terrible with urban kids, or they do, terrible with Black and Hispanic kids, and none of that is showing to be the case. Yes, sir.
Betsy, thanks for coming.
Absolutely.
John, one theory is that just the very fact that they make a choice, people are more involved, they're more invested, and that kind of commitment flows through. And that's what Senator Rotz was saying earlier about driving to the other side of town. Not every family can do that. But this is America, and people get to make choices. But some of it appears to be just the parents are involved in making choices.
There's no question about that. And I think that's an excellent point, because you even see academic outperformance in charter schools versus the traditional public school. And those are both public school environments. But again, you chose to put your kid in a charter school. So somehow you were engaged in that decision versus kind of a default. Let me also be clear, sending your kid to the traditional public school where you live is also a choice, and a good one that everybody should have. I went to public school, and my parents were public school teachers. However, not everyone, my parents purposely moved to a school district that they wanted my brothers and I to attend to. Not everybody has that opportunity either. Either they might not have the resources, or it might not be close to where their job is, or all those types of things. But that is also, and when we look at that pie chart and we see that 80% of people still go to their district public school, I don't want to suggest that those people aren't making a choice. Many of them are. Many of them are specifically choosing to live where they do because of the schooling system. So just as another aside. So we talked again about academic performance. This is iRead. Obviously, literacy is becoming a big topic right now. It is problematic that 1 in 5 third graders cannot read. And certainly, I'm guessing Senator Rotz may have spent some time. That was a big issue that they grappled with this year and did a lot with respect to literacy. When you look at how private schools perform versus everybody else, they knock it out of the park on literacy. So as you can see, we had 92 of the 297 schools that took iRead, 92 of them got 100% passing. And another 91, 90% passing. In fact, the DOE, Dr. Jenner did a little celebration of these schools down at the State House, and 2/3 of the schools that she announced and celebrated were non-public schools. She did it alphabetically. We spent a lot of time in the Saints because there were so many, which was fun to be a part of. We were in the Saints for a long time. And it was fun. We talked about the positive effects of choice and increasing parent engagement. But what we've also found, this is a study that's been done by EdChoice, and they do a lot of research and data. If you haven't gone to their website, they do kind of continual parent satisfaction surveys, and they've got some really interesting data out there. But we're also finding some of these other additional benefits of choice, which is parents are saying that they're talking more to their teachers now that they've picked a school than they did before, that they're more engaged in school activities or the school as a home, that they're starting to volunteer in their community more. And so these are kind of some other non-academic, student-related positives that we're seeing, but they're sort of saying with that choice and with getting in that right school, they're engaging more. So we think it's a pretty good return on investment to date for the state of Indiana. We have the largest single voucher program in the country. Our charter school laws are ranked #1 in the nation and have been for a number of years. We have one of the better education policy environments in the state. And our parents seem to be quite satisfied for the most part. But there's more to do. We talked again about an awareness of families that they have choices, and our organization simply works to make sure that they know that they have choices and then to help them learn about their choices. But they decide what is best for their kids in terms of, we just want to make sure they're making an informed choice. Funding disparities, we talked about it. We can talk further, but they still exist. Probably not right? I don't know that we should be investing in our children at dramatically different amounts when it comes to their education. We need academic improvement across the board. Even our best schools, when you compare with the nation and what to do next, are okay. When we kind of mold in everybody else and we look at a competition beyond high school. And then we talked a little bit about there's new demand for innovative models. And there are a lot of people kind of looking at them. I mean, another thing that has come out of this, again, EdChoice has done this research, but 20-30% of families now say they don't want their kid going to school 5 days a week. They like having that other day to do other activities. Not that they don't want them learning 5 days a week, but they don't want them in school 5 days a week. So how does the environment change to that, right? It's like between 20 and 30% say they don't want. And one of the Lafayette districts is going to try it this year. Now, the problem is I'm not sure everybody's employers are going to say we don't want you at the office 5 days a week, right? So I don't know how all of it's going to try, but they do have one of the school districts in Lafayette is going to give it a whirl this year. They're going to try and do a 4-day week. Yes, ma'am.
I tried school for, kids were in a grade school for a little while that had a 4-day week, and everyone was like, "You're crazy, that's weird, what the heck?" It was fantastic. The kids had a day dedicated to doing other things they wanted to do. They did homework on that day that they were off, and it just freed up the rest of their week. And actually, I don't think that there was no difference in the level.
Learning.
It was a little better in what they got in the 4 days because it took out a lot of the sort of fluff
Mhm.
that I learned was in the school during COVID.
Uh-huh.
It was efficient and it got it done, and I was a huge fan.
Do they report to school and just didn't do school activities, is that what you're saying, or?
No, they don't go. It's a
Or they just
4-day.
Stay home, they stay home? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They typically increase that instructional day. They typically increase that instructional day to 10 hours a day for those 4 days. It usually drops the instructional day count from like 180 to about 151 in total.
And then all those kinds of restrictions, like the 180 and all that stuff, it's all being looked at now because of all of these kinds of things, right? Like, is there really any magic to the 180? Is there any secret sauce? Like, academic data would suggest no, there is no magic to a 180. And this goes, we talked a little bit about work-based learning, right? And this is all a new thing. So, and I'm slightly off topic, but I promise I'll wrap it up. Juniors and seniors in high school say, I don't want to go to school anymore because it's irrelevant. It's stupid. It's a waste of my time. I got better stuff to do. So how do you start making your junior and senior year of high school more relevant? And they say, well, I need some real world experience. Like all this stuff that I learned is pointless and I'm never going to use it again. So how do you incorporate work or service-based volunteerism into high school? And the State Board of Education is really looking on how to do those, how to free up time in that schedule so that kids can then go do an apprenticeship or go do an internship or continue their volunteerism somewhere, and yet get credit for that. How does that translate into then, but that helps me apply towards my graduation, right? That the skills that I'm learning there qualify for graduation. So they're doing a lot of work around that space. But as part of that, you got to get rid of 180 days. You can't add flexibility in a system that says you got to be here 180 days. And hours, and yes, it goes super. Yeah, and so they're going to have to look at that because they say they want flexibility, but I mean they mean like flexibility within this little box, and that doesn't work. So.
I think the other side of the coin I've seen driving it too is like I work pretty closely with Subaru, and as they grow and all these companies come, they're needing the demand on the labor in the workforce. So how can we get these people trained up and developed so that they're valuable employees for us in our what I call low skilled jobs getting into this.
And sometimes what we're finding is like Gaylor Electric here in town has a school in their company. And so the kids will do school part-time and work part-time. But what those kids also have learned is in order to move up the ladder at Gaylor Electric, which I kind of like what I'm doing, I have to get more education. I have to learn some more skills. Where maybe at 17 or 18, they didn't think they were learning anything of value, right? But then when they get in the workplace, then it's like, well, in order to advance, now I get why I have to do math because I actually have to measure before I cut electrical, cords and such. And so I think it's helping a little bit connect with students now on why does education matter in terms of career or college, right? And so anyway, they're looking at it, but a lot of discussion around flexibility, but in a system right now that isn't overly flexible. So we'll have to see how that evolves. Just a quote from Governor Bush, who's been a longtime leader in the education reform space, that it's never complete and it's never more important. And this was in 2021, but I think it still reigns true today.
For the benefit of the group, would you explain the tax credit available to the SGOs?
Sure. Yeah, so the tax credit scholarship program is one of the programs that we have that can help parents pay for private school tuition and fees, which is important. The and fees is important. And the way it works is the state currently allots to the program $18.5 million in a fiscal year, July 1, June 30 fiscal year, for tax credits. You as an individual or a business could do this, can give any amount of money that you might want, $1 to an unlimited, there's no cap on that. You can direct it to a private school of your choice or several. And in exchange for, if you gave $1,000, you get a 50% or a $500 tax credit on your Indiana taxes. That tax credit, if your tax liability isn't $500, can be carried forward for up to 9 years. And so we have not exhausted the credits in the state of Indiana for the last couple of years. So we're looking to continue to figure out how to help schools expand the use. Part of that is because as the voucher has grown, so you can couple these, you can stack them. So a family can go to a non-public school and they qualify for a voucher, and that's $6,000, and then they might get a tax credit scholarship, and that all of a sudden, you know, if it's $6,000 and tuition was $6,500, they can get a $500 tax credit scholarship, and they're done, right? And so that's how that works. So you can again, give an unlimited amount. You have to give it through an SGO. So Sagamore is one, IQE is one, and then the other ones are geographic. So Elkhart County Community Foundation does one for the schools in Elkhart County. The Fort Wayne South Bend Diocese does one for the schools in the Fort Wayne South Bend Diocese. And then the Lutheran Partnership does one for some of the Lutheran schools in Indiana.
How do schools get qualified so you know you can write them a check?
Yeah, so there's a list online on the state's website, but it's really any non-public school, and they do an agreement with one of the SGOs, which is just sort of a very simple sheet of paper.
It's not a high bar to get certified.
No, it's a very low bar, actually, which is great, And then, like I said, you can pick a school or you can pick multiple schools. What you can't do is pick a kid. So you can't say, well, I'll write you a check as long as my kid gets the scholarship. But as we've tried to explain to schools, if all the families were to do that, and then all of the families qualified for a scholarship without saying everybody gets a scholarship, you would have enough money for everybody to get a scholarship. So, but yeah, you can step right up to everything except naming a person. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about special needs children. I noticed you had a lot of money that they get it and their siblings.
Well, depends. I wouldn't say we're overly generous in funding our special needs children in the state.
My question is, we've seen on the news where there's been problems in schools and how they handle special needs problems. Should we have a special school just for special needs where they're not in the other population? And
Yep.
I'm not discriminating against
Yep.
students.
I think that there's some of those exist, right? So there are schools that deal with only certain children. There are a lot of schools in Indiana that deal with children on the autism spectrum, for example, and only children on the autism spectrum. However, that, you know, our public schools don't have that opportunity, right? They have to serve everyone. And I think there's a wide range of thought amongst parents of special needs students in terms of inclusion and mainstreaming versus not. And so I think it just continues to be a challenge. You also have some federal law in there.
Does that money be used for the unified sport programs that's coming up?
No.
Why not?
The SGO money, or
The ESA money. Because
it's not an approved expense right now.
What did you say, unified?
if you've seen any of the unified sports, they're growing rapidly, and it's really the coolest thing I probably got to experience. But it's regular students and special needs students partner together in track or whatever activity, and it's really just a really cool experience.
So they're not technically listed as an approved expense. However, somebody can make a case to the treasurer's office who administers this program, and they can make it an approved expense. And I would argue that State Treasurer Daniel Elliott and others are taking a very generous look at that because they're big believers in the program. And so is it technically listed? No, but is there a way to get it approved? Yes. And like I said, I think Treasurer Elliott and his team are pretty generous in interpretation. Yes, sir.
The State Board of Education's graduation requirements
Yeah.
changing. Is there going to be training or opportunities for non-public schools to understand what requirements are changing so that way they can be just as effective?
Oh yeah, everybody's going to hear all about it. And it's still a work in progress, right? So that's still open for public comment and will remain open for public comment. A new rule will come out, I believe, in mid-August after the first set of public comments, and we'll have some changes to the diploma and graduation requirements, and then they'll go through a second round. By state law, they have to pass a rule by the end of the calendar year. So I think, that second one will be out there for 2 or 3 months too. But there will be all kinds of training for all kinds of schools to make sure that everybody can comply and has every opportunity. In fact, I will tell you one of the changes that I think will be coming in August, because I spent some time with Dr. Jenner yesterday, has been driven by non-public schools. She had a meeting with several superintendents and heads of school. The head of Garen was kind of their spokesperson. But one of the things that they said was service needs to be just as important as on-the-job training, right? So it shouldn't just be I have to go do a work job, but if I volunteer someplace, but I don't get a paycheck, but I volunteer at a food pantry or I volunteer at Habitat for Humanity, and I do these types of things, that should count, right? That should count as my apprenticeship and she and the state board, I think, have decided, yes, that should count. It shouldn't just be, did I go get a job and get a paycheck? If I'm contributing to my community in one of those volunteer fashions, that I'm getting those same kinds of skills, right? So
Where does the holding these people accountable in any facet? Like, do we have funds for the offices to hold people accountable for this money and where it's going?
for which money and where do you mean?
It seems like there's a lot of money changing hands that could potentially get in like a lot of private hands that the state doesn't have eyes on their financials and things.
You mean private schools?
Between private schools and if we go to the micro schools, which you said the vouchers don't go for now, but I don't know, it just seems like someone has to manage this.
I think people have more of an eye on it than you think. I think what they're looking for, right, in your accountability, and this goes to testing and some other things, is are we getting the education, the academic return for the investment? Versus are they monitoring every dollar? I will tell you our non-public schools would lose their mind and jettison from the voucher program in a hot second if the state had eyes into every school's financials, right? And started questioning every choice that the school made in terms of where they were investing dollars. But again, for a little less money, 90% instead of 100%, they're producing a lot better academic outcomes. So other than, if a scandal comes up, do I really care? Non-public schools, I will say this too, The non-public schools got overpaid one year in the voucher program by like $20 million. And they figured it out on their own. And of course, being good faith-based schools, they went and told the state and the DOE that you overpaid us. And they were, of course, like, no, we didn't. And they're like, no, you really did. Like, we want to give you this money back that we're not supposed to do. I guarantee you there's not another school district out there that is like, hey, I need you to take this money that you sent us. So they're pretty good at their own fiscal steward stuff. The ESA stuff, right? This is where I think expansion is going to be challenging, and we're watching other states. Indiana, Senator Rotz and his team, they like incremental change. They don't like 0 to 60. And people are really worried about when you say, okay, I'm going to give a parent control of all this money for their child's education, and they can customize it however they want. How do I know that they're not just spending it on crazy stuff, right? Or how do I know that the therapist that they're going to is actually good and trained and qualified and all of those things? And so you'll hear about different odd expenditures that have been caught in other states with programs, and they're continuing to try and ratchet it down. And this is where this whole flexibility and personalization and customization that everybody wants and guardrails, this is where it starts to collide, right? We want to let everybody do everything, but then bad actors start to,
Yeah, someone always takes advantage, so I guess that's what I worry about.
and then everybody kind of overcorrects. So it'll be interesting to watch, for sure. And of course, I've already gone 5 minutes over, which I was trying not to do. Other thoughts or questions or topics? You guys are awfully quiet, or I put you to sleep. Thank you.
Did you all have any idea all this is going on behind the